Hi, and welcome to the third installment of our LinkedIn Live series, ISM World 2024, The People You'll Meet. My name is Dan Zeiger. I'm a senior writer and copy editor for Inside Supply Management. That's ISM's member publication, and we're excited to have you as a part of today's event. Our time today will be focused on two of the people that you'll meet at conference, which is April 29th through May 1st at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. And the next 30 minutes will be an interactive experience that'll enable you to learn more about the conference, as well as get to know Mandy, Flint, and Elisabet Vinberg Hearn, who are perhaps the two best experts that you can find. I know they're the best I can find on how companies can experience transformational change through effective leadership. So feel free to ask questions throughout today's event, and we'll be sure to address them by the end of our broadcast if we have time. Before we get started, but feel free to comment in the chat feature on where you're joining us from today. And if you've already registered for ISM World 2024, you might be able to make a virtual connection today with someone you can later meet in person in Las Vegas. Registration includes access to 8 powerful and highly interactive workshops on April 29th. Those will help you hit the ground running at the conference, and they cover such hot supply management topics as practical uses of artificial intelligence, or to set up a sustainability program. But today, we're going to discuss a topic so critical it's the focus of 2 of those workshop sessions. It's called Supercharged Leadership. And if you have an interest in learning about 6 mindsets or skill sets that will empower you to be a better leader, this is going to be an opportunity to learn. One of those workshop sessions on April 29th will be for individual contributors, and the other for people leaders. So let's bring in the people who are going to bring those workshops to us. They're Mandy Flint and Elisabet Vinberg Hearn. They're leadership and culture change strategists working with C-suite executives, leaders in their teams to empower organizations to navigate change and achieve excellence. And among their clients are some of the world's most iconic brands like Apple, SAP, Google, HSBC, American Express, MasterCard, H&M, and IKEA. And they're best-selling authors with 4 books to their credit. Their latest release, Supercharged Leader, is scheduled to be published in May. Their 2019 book, The Leader's Guide to Impact, is on my office shelf, and I hope to share one of my favorite parts with you today and ask them about it. Something that I appreciate the most, you can read them every issue of Inside Supply Management in their Last Word on Leadership column. So Mandy, Elisabet, it's great to have you here with us today. Can you just give us an overview of the Supercharged Leadership workshops and what participants can expect to gain from them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're really excited to be attending. We're looking forward to it. We're sort of at this moment setting up, thinking ahead, and like everybody. But our 6 superchargers are probably what we're going to be really focusing in on that particular program. So we're going to talk about identifying the 6 superchargers. So we're talking about the 6 mindsets and skill sets that empower leaders, particularly when they're used together, to embrace an increasingly complex and fast changing world of work. So we're living in this world where things are moving fast. So how do you keep up, stay ahead as a leader? And how do you get ready as a leader to deal with anything? The mindsets and skill sets that we don't even know about yet. We don't even know that we need to know. So how do we stay ahead as a leader? So the 6 superchargers, to give you a quick overview, are Supercharged Strategy, which is about taking a step back, visionary thinking, long-term thinking, systems thinking, how you differentiate. Supercharged Inclusion, which is about diversity, valuing differences, psychological safety, a sense of belonging to something. Supercharged Connectivity, which is about brain-kind communication. How do we communicate together? How do we deal with collaborative ecosystems when the world gets really much more complex? Digital connectivity, courageous vulnerability is what we think about in connectivity. Then we move on to number 4, which is a supercharged collective intelligence. You've heard a lot about this, but this is going to be even more important in the future. So how do you create great teams? How do you get people to work together? But how do you really use that collective intelligence to get people to be creative and innovative and deal with the ever-changing AI that we operate in at the moment? How do you be ready for what you don't even know that you don't know yet? So how do you prepare for that? And our 5th one is supercharged learning. So how do you learn to learn? How do you create a learning culture? How do you focus on having the constant conversations? How coachable are you? What's your own coachability? And 6 is a supercharged agility. So that's about being entrepreneurial, being adapting, handling trade-offs and dilemmas and resilience. So those mindsets and skill sets are kind of interacted, of course, with each other, but that using those together, we kind of get to look at those in greater depth.
Yeah. What inspired the creation of the concept of the 6 superchargers, and just how best do they apply to leadership, in today's work environment?
Yeah, so in today's, the reality for many leaders is they're so busy doing the technical job, trying to navigate that fast pace of change, that it's kind of thinking about, they don't spend enough time thinking about being strategic on their own leadership. So they can be running a little bit on empty. So missing the time to focus on what will be expected of them as leaders, not just today, but also tomorrow. So we started thinking about that, ready for our Supercharged Leader, the book that's coming out. And we're very intrigued by the future. So we're constantly looking around and looking ahead to prepare and equip leaders. So we try to predict, so what's happening in the world, therefore, what does that mean is going to happen in a leadership trend? And then that helps people, equip people for that, and think about, what does that mean? And at the moment, you can think of all the things that are happening in the world. So future trends of work, like the speed of change and transformation, increases the need for shared leadership, greater leadership, greater collective intelligence, globalization's picking up speed again, working from home and living at work. So more people are having that debate about remotely and work and workplace, and that's going to continue to change. So these skills are going to look at those things that are becoming even more important. Psychological safety becomes more important. Organizational purpose is taking center stage. So how do we get people to feel part of something that's much bigger than them? And AI's impact on jobs is on everyone's agenda. So leadership needs to be more people focused. And so it was our inspiration was to say, how do we get people to really stop and think about that and be strategic about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, can you give us a sneak peek into the workshop, and just how will it help individual contributors enhance their leadership skills, especially with those dynamics that Mandy just discussed?
Of course, yeah. And ultimately, leadership is the act and art of influencing others. So every single person is a leader. It's not just about being a formal leader. So I think from an individual contributor point of view, it's very much about thinking about, how do I become really in charge of my own situation, as I live in a very fast-paced world that's changing all the time. And we're constantly going to have challenges and opportunities around us. And at an individual level, we need to have those kind of mindsets and skill sets that this book is about, so that we can lead ourselves through this, so that we can find that we can be excited about changes and not fall into almost the trap of being fearful and resistant to anything that happens around us. And I think we can all agree that the world is changing very fast all the time. So we really want to equip people so they can, for themselves, still really have the skills that's going to help them deal with anything, even if they're not leading other people. And so in a way, I guess I would call it's about being a great self-leader. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, why was it important? You guys are, you two are doing 2 workshops on the 29th, one for individuals and then other for people leaders. Why was it important, to kind of divide those? And, specifically the workshop for people leaders, it's designed for those in managerial roles. How does that workshop in particular cater to the needs and responsibilities of team leaders?
Yeah, and I think there it's really about, when you lead teams, it's not just your own ability to use these skills, mindsets and skill sets that are important, but it's also about helping your team take them on, and also using these skills to really perform better as a team. And it's about, by understanding the dynamics of the 6 superchargers, as a leader, you can help your team through understanding how important it is. So, for example, when you're working with your team, it can be a question of understanding, how can I get my team to own inclusion, for example? Because inclusion is about really listening out and including other people and making sure that you make the most of everyone's skills that they bring to the table. And a lot of the time, as an individual contributor, you might think that, well, that's for my leader to think about. But actually, as a leader, if you can more and more get everyone to understand that, inclusion isn't dictated just from the top. It's something that everyone needs to own. And it's the same thing with collective intelligence, to really, as a leader, find the little tools and the nuggets that really helps the team to understand that, wow, how can we achieve more together? How can we actually be smarter together if we truly understand the dynamic between these different superchargers?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, as Elisabet said there, leadership is the act and art of influencing others. So you can be a leader and a leader of people, a leader of teams, but you can also be a really strong, significant, informal leader, without having to have direct reports or having that responsibility. So I think this is something where we say leadership skills, but we're really talking about a cross section of, you can be a leader at many different levels. And as Elisabet said, it's about, leading yourself, leading people, whether they report to you or not, leading the business, leading teams, leading transformational, fast-paced change, which is now the new normal. But leading all of those things, we have to do whether we are, an individual contributor or indeed a leader. So that, I think, it's, as Elisabet said, it's about self-leadership in there as well.
Yeah. It just reminded me of a question, whichever one of you wants to take it. I know this is something that you've tried to convey as long as you've been talking on this topic, that you can be a leader at any level. Do you find, as you've tried to convey this, that you get some resistance or pushback from people that you talk to that are surprised that that people might think that way, or think that they can't be a leader because of where they are?
Good question. I think resistance, I wouldn't say we have resistance. I think, you always get resistance, but I think more about awareness of, maybe I have a greater influence than I really think I have. And I think people don't sometimes realize the impact and effect that they can have on other people, whether they are an individual contributor or not, but they have the ability to influence and impact others every minute of every day. And you can do that by being intentional about that, or just letting that happen. And I think people become much more aware of that. And then resistance when I think it's the word leadership that makes people think, oh, I don't know if that sounds a big word. And actually it's not necessarily, it's just the word. It's not necessarily the essence behind that, the meaning behind that.
Yeah. But I think as well, to add to that, I think it's sometimes we as human beings, we may sometimes feel out of control. There's so much going on around us, and we're trying to control it all, and we can't control very much at all. Ultimately, we can control ourselves. So the idea here is to, with the 6 superchargers and with the work that we do, is to help people take the control that they can, because people tend to feel better to the degree they feel in control of things than the other way around. So it's really bringing home the message that this is a great opportunity, to actually feel that you're in charge. You're not a victim to whatever's going on around you. There are certain things you can do. And that's very much, it's a very big part of what leadership is.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to the part of the time together that I was looking most forward to today, talking about a specific example of or an insight or a skill. You guys are going to get a chance to share one, and then I'm going to share one that I thought was really cool that you put it out, that you pointed out in your book, The Leader's Guide to Impact. But what's an example of a valuable insight or skill of maybe one of the superchargers that we've already talked about, or something else that participants can not only expect to develop during one of the workshops, but in general is important for them to develop in terms of building leadership skills? Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to whittle it down to one. So maybe I'll share just a couple. One of them is a favorite quote of ours, which is, being 100% perfect 100% of the time is 100% impossible. So it's that whole idea. Sometimes we are caught up in the whole idea that I have to do everything right. And if we're stuck in the idea of getting everything right, we're not going to thrive in the future, because we're not going to get things right. So it's very much about that whole idea of, every single thing is learning. And the more I become flexible in the way that my mind works, I'm not just stuck in thinking this is how it is, assuming that this is just what it's only this way that it can work. It's not like that. So that's definitely a big part in this. But also this whole idea of how are we smarter together? The whole idea of thinking no one can know everything. And if you can really start to surround yourself and connect with people that are different to you, and you're going to have different input, the output of the conversations that you have, the kind of creativity and innovation that drives from that is massive. So that whole idea of being curious about that, what others have to bring, if you like.
And I think that rolls into the never stop learning, and the how do you never stop learning? So, and to some degree, we have to learn. We have to keep learning that, in this fast-paced change world we operate in transformational change, and we have to constantly think about what are we learning from this? What are we picking up from this? And have that learning mindset, which means we've got to be curious and open-minded and allow for that, and allow that things don't always work out. Things don't always go great. They're not always perfect. And that's part of learning, and allowing for that, because if you don't have that learning culture, then you don't get creative and innovation and innovative results. So I think it's also about that constantly learning and having that ability to keep learning, and asking yourself, how coachable am I, and what's my level of coachability to learn. So I think that would be one, but there's so many that it's hard to whittle it down.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about one that I liked. In the Leader's Guide to Impact, you cited a specific skill as a writer. I love it. It's a skill that I use a lot and appreciate most, and I know that you guys utilize it liberally. It's storytelling. And I'm going to read an excerpt from the book. You say, most people relate more to stories and examples than to mere facts. So it's a great way of effectively engaging people. In stakeholder influencing, using stories is very helpful in getting your message across. So bring your information to life by using a story to illustrate a point. Senior leaders use stories too. Take the information you want to give, then give an example you can use to make it come alive. And you can also research stories to add value to your data. That's pages 76 and 77 in the Leader's Guide to Impact on storytelling. As I say, I love that part of it. And my question for you is it really an underappreciated skill in today's environment of where everyone just wants the bullet points and just wants the bare facts? I mean, do you find that it helps make colleagues more comfortable and confident, not only in receiving the information, but sharing what they may have to add? And does it foster creativity as well?
Yeah, and we love storytelling. I mean, our books are all about telling the story and then unpicking the story and working with it. And I think it does make people more comfortable. Sometimes people don't like the term storytelling. Again, it's a term that people don't like. So, if you say, well, it's just an example, or it's a case study, or it's something, it helps people connect to it. And in the world that we operate in, people get more confident with that and more comfortable with that. And our first book we wrote was a pure story format. It was about a merger and acquisition of two businesses coming together, and it was the story of the leader bringing the two teams together and bringing the company together, and all the struggles and challenges that go with that. And the publisher was keen. We published that one, and then the next publisher we worked with wasn't so keen on the whole story technique. So we had to sort of go into, let's tell the story, and now let's unpick that story. And but we find that people love stories. They like to they connect with our stories. So we often use stories. For example, one of the great stories that we talk about are, if I want to, Elisabet and I were working in Belgium actually, and we were in a particular session, and we didn't feel particularly, we'd ran this workshop a number of times, and we knew it was called self-leadership, and we knew people would get an awful lot out of it. But we didn't feel particularly inspired going into it, and we needed to feel inspired. So we kept saying to ourselves, what do we need to do? Because to be inspiring, you need to feel inspired. You need to feel. I can't say I feel terribly inspired today. I'm not really feeling it. So we have to feel it. So we had to work on. Okay, so how we've think of all the times and all the people that we've worked with before, and all the things we've changed, and all the creativity that we've pulled out from them. So we did that, and then we ourselves got inspired, which meant we were inspiring, and we never used the word, but in a feedback at the end, it just said that was the most inspiring thing we've been through. So it kind of shows you can do that by. We tell you that story for a reason, and by telling that story, you link much more to what we mean than me just saying you need to feel inspired to be inspiring. So it's that's the way that we like to roll it up. I don't know if you'd add any more to that, Elisabet.
No, I think that describes it really well. But I think what also is quite telling is that our first book, that was a real story. The whole thing was a story. The number of people that contacted us and said, gosh, you've been watching us, haven't you? It feels exactly like, because there were so many recognizable moments where people said, oh gosh, we have email exchanges like that, or we have those kind of meetings as well. And it's that as well, because I think it's just easier to relate to, because it becomes specific and it becomes more than just information.
Yeah.
Real relatable.
Well, I know when you talk about skill sets, especially in the last few years, I mean, you can't tell the story about how they've changed from a business standpoint without talking about the pandemic and, you know, the turmoil that put a lot of everyday operations under, and the way things changed and how we do face-to-face and how we do business. Just that skills, what's been the most important, or, that's needed the most refining in the era of COVID-19?
I think to some degree, we've already mentioned it. A lot of it is the whole idea of not becoming stuck in our thinking and thinking this is how things need to be. Because all of a sudden, everyone was thrown into this turmoil of, okay, we need to sort of reset everything within 24 hours or whatever. People need to work from home, whatever it was. And people did really well with it. And I think a lot of people were surprised with how well that went. But it's almost that constant being okay with living in a VUCA world, the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity is sort of here to stay. And in order to do that, I think the other thing that we found really needs refining or being used more now since the pandemic is this whole idea of becoming much more aware of what's going on around. Really looking outwards more and being interested and figuring out. And this is where the collective intelligence comes in as well, of course, because you can't spot everything yourself, but by coming together with other people, you can really sort of feed that information and the realization and the insights that come from that. So not being stuck in our thinking and really being outward looking and being very aware of what's happening around you.
Yeah.
I guess
go ahead, Mandy.
What I'd add to that is just that, what we don't know what the next, it's not a pandemic, but what the next thing could be that impacts us, which is really where we got the inspiration to write this, to say, we don't know what's next. So how can we be ever ready with our skill set as a leader to be ready for anything? Not have to have all the answers. We don't have to have all the answers, but we need to know where we can go to get them, or we know somebody who can, or we know, but we don't need to know all of those answers. So who wrote the book on the pandemic before it happened? Nobody, because nobody imagined it could happen. Well, some people did imagine it could happen, but so you then have to say, but since then the world has shifted and it's going to change again, and it's going to change again. So how can we be ever ready? So really the inspiration for this workshop as well is, how can you be ever ready for all those things that you don't even know you need to be ready for yet? Yeah.
Well, when I was preparing these questions for you today, and I was talking to someone else about it, this question that's coming up, the reaction was, oh, that's I'm dying to know that. So here it is. Just how did you guys get together? How did you guys go into partnership with each other? Go ahead.
Yeah, and it's only 5 years ago. No, I'm just kidding. It's more than 25 years ago. Mandy and I both worked at American Express in the UK, and we're working on a big culture change sort of enhancement program for American Express for Europe, and which was a fantastic, exciting, very we learned a lot on that journey. I mean, talk about using one of the superchargers for sure. And then we both left and then started up our own companies. And then over the years, we've sort of come back together at regular intervals, collaborating. And then one day I think it's probably about 12 years ago, we started saying, I'd quite like to write a book. Oh, so would I. And then all of a sudden that kicked off as well. And we are using a lot, I think, of our own leadership in that. With regards to how we do that. You know, our principles for how we think great leadership should be. Go on, Mandy.
I was going to say, you know, we spend a lot of time practicing what we preach as well, because, you know, I said to Elisabet, I would like to write a book. She said, so would I. So we then came together and said, yeah, but if we do it together, we're much more likely to do it, and we're much more likely. So we used our collective intelligence, and we also, you know, there's a thing about style diversity. We have different styles, and we appreciate those different styles, and we use those different styles. So 1 and 1 equals 5, because we are doing that rather than just my thinking or just Elisabet's thinking. So we talk a lot about that in terms of how you get different thinking in. And as we go into the future, diversity moves on from what we understand it to be today into something much more about style diversity, and understanding that those style differences are crucial. So I think we use it like that quite a lot, and we bounce off each other just like we do today. You know, I could think something, Elisabet thinks something, and those two things together make something greater.
Yeah, that's could you elaborate? Could you elaborate? Yeah, I know you touched on it just now, both of you. Could you elaborate? Because I would imagine that, you know, there are times you're not going to see eye to eye. There are times that certain responsibilities between the two of you have to be delegated. And could you just talk about, you know, how you apply the leadership principles that you talk about in your relationship with one another? Yeah,
we just fight.
Yeah.
No, we don't. No, we don't fight. We look at, you know, you do the kind of step back, look at it, look at this. You know, what do we need to think about? How we, you know, let's put it from other angles, other perspectives. You know, people you get to understand each other. I think the thing is, we know each other very well, and we understand each other. So we understand where those things are going to come up, and what we're going to do with those, and that we know we're going to find a way through that. And we have resilience. We, you know, written 4 books together. We know what that's like. We know what it takes. We work together a lot. We have worked with lots of challenging people, and we know how that's going to work. We know what's going to come ahead. And when we don't know, we don't worry about that either. We're like, well, we'll figure it out. We'll work that out. Well, that'll happen.
Yeah.
What would you say, Elisabet?
No, I agree. And I think there is that as well about holding each other to account. So I hear a lot of people that ask, oh, I'd quite like to write a book, and I don't know if I would find the time or whatever. And we often don't have the time, but because there's 2 of us, we have, you know, the double brain capacity, but also we hold each other to account. I think otherwise it would be easy to say, oh no, I haven't really got time now. But when there's 2, you're sort of made a promise to each other. So of course you keep going. You know, and we get stuff done that way.
Yeah. Well, that's great storytelling right there. I love that. So, you know, that's a great way to end our time here. Hey, Mandy and Elisabet, thanks a lot. That was great. I really appreciate your time and sharing your insights with us. And I know it's going to be a fun workshop with you two in Las Vegas. So thanks again. Thanks to Mandy and Elisabet for joining us. Their workshop sessions at ISM World 2024 are titled Supercharged Leadership, and their book, Supercharged Leader, will be published in May. And once again, you can read them in every issue of Inside Supply Management, their last word on leadership column. Huge thank you to joining us. We hope you found some great takeaways and that you'll join us at ISM World 2024 at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. If you've already registered, we look forward to seeing you. And if you haven't, you can do so and get more information by visiting ismworld.org annual. So if you'd like to learn more about the sessions at ISM World 2024, we'll have a LinkedIn and Live event next Wednesday with another person you'll meet in Las Vegas. So for Mandy Flint and Elisabet Vinberg Hearn, as well as Robin Garrison, who helped us behind the scenes today, I'm Dan Zeiger. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.